Hello, let's get started. I am Laura King. I'm a Curator's Distinguished Professor in the Department of Psychological Sciences at the University of Missouri, and it's my pleasure today to talk to you about the experience of meaning in life in an ever-changing world. I was really inspired to put this all together because I was very interested in sort of sharing with people um, what factors might be involved in the experience of meaning in life, especially now during this COVID-19 pandemic. I want to give a special shout out to my graduate students, Hope and Jake, as well as our collaborator, Vlad, who helped me with a lot of the studies that I'll be talking about today. I also want you to note that my email address is on the front here, kingla@missouri.edu. If any of the studies I talk about are of interest to you, drop me an email. I'm happy to send you reprints. If you'd like to get a copy of the slides or whatever, just let me know. Okay, so I have spent the last couple of decades studying the experience of meaning in life. And meaning in life is obviously an important part of psychological well-being. But what I've found is that many people, including many psychologists, have some misconceptions about the experience of meaning in life. And so I thought we might start, if we can, by talking about dispelling some of those. So these are not just misconceptions about meaning in life, they're also sort of misconceptions about the world. One thing that psychologists often say is that meaning, the human experience of meaning, is a construction. It's something that we create and then lay over an otherwise chaotic reality. And that is a really common idea, but I'm a girl from the Midwest. And so I have to ask the question, is reality otherwise chaotic? Is it true that reality itself has no inherent patterns or consistencies? And what I'd like to talk about just for a little minute here is to think about that for a moment. Is reality otherwise chaotic? If you think about it, the physical world is characterized by lawfulness, right? The laws of physics. We know that objects fall down, not up. And invariance, right? The physical world itself is not super chaotic as a general rule, especially if you think about our local environments, right? In terms of our everyday lives, events are often systematic. Things often do make sense. In fact, this ties in with James Gibson's early ideas about perception. And he said, right, that the world has these invariances if the specifying invariances are normally available. An active observer can extract them and does not have to construct them. And Gibson proposed that our perceptual systems evolve in this environment, right? That we are just like other organisms, right? We have evolved to be specially tuned to the invariance of our environments. Think about the idea of associative learning. Right? People often say that meaning is about connection. And certainly associative learning is about making connections, right, between stimuli. And if you think about animals, right, and the way that they learn associations, let's say between a conditioned stimulus and an unconditioned stimulus. So Damian, when he was talking about these ideas and thinking about associative learning in an evolutionary context, in an adaptive context, right, he suggested this, right? If we want to think about the pairings of conditioned and unconditioned stimuli to be functional in a natural environment, right? If it is adaptive to learn those associations, then those pairings must be a feature of the natural environment. So let's think about two rats. We have this rat in the Skinner box, right? Learning associations between its behavior and rewards. And then we have this other rat in the natural world. The ability of the rat in this highly artificial situation to learn relationships between behaviors and stimuli, right? Behaviors and rewards, tells us something about the world that this other rat, the one in the natural world, the world that rat lives in. For it to be an adaptive thing to acquire, right, these learned associations, which of course we think of as adaptive, then the rat in the natural world must live in a world that makes sense, at least some of the time, right? It must be a good bet for that rat to believe the world makes sense. And I'm sorry, I said belief about rats. But think about it. A rat's behavior in a highly artificial environment tells us about a quality of objective reality for the rat living in the natural environment. That natural environment is not, quote, otherwise chaotic. So very often the world makes sense, and our perceptual capacities evolved in and for just such a world. Another thing people often say is that meaning in life is ineffable. It cannot even be defined. And of course that's not true. Here's a definition of meaning proposed by Mike Steger. He said, meaning is the web of connections, understandings, and interpretations that help us comprehend our experience, formulate plans, directing our energies to the achievement of our desired future. Meaning provides us with the sense that our lives matter and that they make sense and that they are more than the sum of our seconds, days, and years. Or much shorter definition provided by my colleagues and myself many years ago was this: lives may be experienced as meaningful when they are felt to have significance beyond the trivial or momentary, to have purpose, and to have a coherence that transcends chaos. These highlighted labels here, significance, purpose, and coherence, represent really the currently accepted idea of at least these three experiences seem to contribute to a sense of meaning in life. So these are thought of as sort of so far, the facets of meaning in life. And so coherence is about feeling like your life makes sense, feeling like that your life fits in a unified whole. Purpose, which is often considered synonymous with meaning, right, is about having goals that compel a person to go forward, right? To feel that your behavior is driven by personally valued aims. And then significance is this sense of mattering, existential mattering. And these example items are just from some established scales that tap into these facets of meaning. And significance is really, I always like to think about it as mattering to the people around you, right? It's that social part of meaning in life. And research has shown that these kinds of experiences of these three facets of meaning feed into a sort of global sense that life is meaningful, a subjective sense that life is meaningful. Some psychologists also, in my opinion, seem to believe that meaning in life is rare, that is reserved for like the sort of chosen few, the people who truly flourish or thrive, and that meaning can only emerge out of particularly profound experiences. This is really one of the problems that I have with the whole idea of positive psychology. And some of my work, obviously, because I study well-being, fits underneath the umbrella of positive psychology. But here's where it starts to feel like an uncomfortable umbrella for me. Positive psychologists would say that we have business as usual psychology, right? That focus too much on that lower end of the normal curve. And what we need to do to really understand people, right, is focus more on this higher end, right? The right end of the normal curve. People who are really high in psychological strengths and psychological capital, people who are flourishing or thriving. This really drives me crazy. I think that any psychology, be it positive, any psychology, is most successful when it is able to understand most people. That if we only focus on, or we only conclude that strengths are only available to certain groups of people, right? The elite, who have time to really introspect and create their perfect life and pursue the right kind of happiness. If we only focus on things that are that rare, then we're missing the big chunk of people, like everyday people. As a scholar who studies meaning in life, one of the things that I always think about and that I'm constantly concerned with is understanding meaning in life as people actually live it. Not an experience that psychologists invented, but an experience that everyday people have. Interestingly, right, we know that meaning in life is supposed to be, quote, good, right? Big thinkers, important people have said that people who experience meaning in life should be better off than those who experience their lives as less meaningful. So like Maslow said, right, the human needs a framework of value, a philosophy of life in about the same sense that he needs sunlight, calcium, and love, right? That the sense of something, a larger value system that gives life meaning, is absolutely vital to survival. And of course, Viktor Frankl said, there's nothing in the world that would so effectively help one survive as the knowledge that there is meaning in life. And meaning in life, sure, it is. It turns out really good, like in the ways that you would think something would be if it had an adaptive significance. And these are just a sampling of some of the bajillions of things that meaning in life, self-report ratings of meaning in life predict over time. And this is actually, we recently reviewed a bunch of these things in this annual review paper. So if you're interested in having a copy of that paper, that is a compendium of all of the great things that meaning in life predicts, I'm happy to send it to you. But think about this paradox. On the one hand, we say that meaning in life is crucial to survival, right? It is super important, it's adaptive. And on the other, we say it's rare and hard to find. And it's really reserved for only the, quote, elites, right? Both of those things can't be true. Nothing we require to survive can be difficult to come by. It can't even be difficult, right? It certainly can't be rare, and it can't be difficult. The things we need to survive have to be available to us, right? Think about it, right? Water and food and oxygen and each other. These are the things we need to survive, and they are here in the world, available to us. If meaning is important to survival, then it must also be available. So, which is it? Is meaning in life adaptive, or is it rare? So, what we have found in our work, and this is with former student Samantha Heintzelman, and I did this crazy analysis. What we did is we found all of the places where we could find where the experience of meaning in life has been measured, including national samples, representative samples of the US, this worldwide sample I'm going to tell you about in a second, all of the research that's been done where people have actually measured the experience of meaning in life. So this is from a worldwide survey from the Gallup Global Poll, and it was presented by Shige Oishi and Ed Diener in 2014. And what they did is in this poll, they asked people, representative samples of 122 nations, do you feel your life has a special purpose or meaning? If you're curious, the United States mean is up there where that blue arrow is. 90 at the level of nation, right? So averaging within a nation, 91% said, yes, I feel my life has a special purpose or meaning. 91%. Now you might think, well, they asked that as a yes or no question. Maybe people said yes, but their meaning in life would be low. If you measured it, it has some bit of purpose and meaning. So what we did is we collected up all of the means that have been reported for research using an established measure of meaning in life. And this is a table. We published this in American Psychologist some years ago. But what we found is that most people rate their lives as pretty meaningful. And you can see the big lump right in the middle at about 4.5 to 5 is where most of the means showed up. These are weighted by the ends in the studies. And you can see most people actually rate their lives as pretty meaningful. And these means aren't just from studies using undergraduates. If you see, we have some what we call special samples. These are people who are non-college samples going through some kind of serious negative experiences. So for example, in a sample of women with breast cancer, and what they did is they had two groups. They were trying to increase these women's experience of meaning in life. Those averages there, 4.66 and 5.22, that's on a scale from 1 to 7. Those are the pre-measures before the intervention. People diagnosed with serious psychological disorders for more than a year, on a scale from 1 to 7, 5.63 was the mean. Many people in many different settings report that their lives are meaningful. It is not a rare experience. It is a commonplace experience that is part and parcel of everyday human life. Oh, if you're curious. So you might be curious, that one little blip there in the low, kind of pretty low meaning in life with a 2.5 to 2.99, that is one study that was a sample of undergraduates. We could talk about sometime why undergraduates, I think, are the people who are most likely to be questioning whether life has meaning. And, okay, so not only is meaning in life a commonplace experience, it's also it comes from commonplace experiences, right? It is not about necessarily about rare and profound life experiences, a life of great accomplishment, or the birth of a child. Surely and getting married, these are very meaningful experiences, but meaning in life is not constrained to just such experiences. For example, right, we've seen this in many, many experiments now. If we induce people into a positive mood, right? So these are the results of a study where we randomly assigned people to a negative mood induction, a neutral mood induction, or a positive mood induction. And the neutral mood, I think it was a free flowing mood group. So they just went however they came in to the lab that day. And as you can see, people who had been experimentally induced to experience a positive mood rated their lives as more meaningful. Now, the other thing I want you to notice, because this is relevant later, is that a negative mood induction had no effect on the experience of meaning in life. And this fits with other studies that have looked at things like daily diaries or experience sampling studies, showing that the experience of meaning in life is much more wound up in our positive emotions than it is in negative emotion. Just something to put a pin in that idea. Okay, another very commonplace experience that meaning in life can spring from is the experience of pattern and regularity. So we were sort of inspired by that idea of the coherence aspect of meaning to see, well, if coherence, if the world making sense is part of the reason why life feels meaningful, would it be affected by exposure to pattern versus chaos? So what we did is we randomly assigned people to two groups. In both groups, they saw pictures, these beautiful pictures of trees. There were 16 pictures, 4 that represented each of the 4 seasons, right? And these are recognizable as spring, summer, fall, and winter. So for half of the participants, they were exposed to these pictures in cycles of 4 that conform to the seasons. So it went spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall, winter, and so on. The control group simply saw the pictures in one of a variety of completely random order, so not in any way systematized by season. The participants were told what we're interested in is just having them evaluate the pictures, how were they showing up on their screen, and so forth. So they had no idea that we were manipulating the seasonal quality of the pictures. Immediately after they rated the pictures, we asked them to complete a measure of meaning in life. And here's what we found, right? The blue bars are those pictures presented in seasonal order. The red bars are the random order. And as you can see, life is more meaningful when the world makes sense. We've also shown right? If we take that idea like exposure to pattern, well, one of the ways that we have pattern in our lives is by engaging in our everyday routines. So we did ecological momentary assessment, right? And looked at, we beeped people at random times during their day, and we simply asked them whether what they were currently doing was on their everyday routine or not. And then they rated how meaningful they thought their life was at that moment. Moments are experienced as more meaningful when they involve enacting our daily routine. We've also found that meaning in life is more strongly related to intuitive information processing than to that reflective analytical processing, right? So in contrast to this idea that meaning is something we have to sit around and think about and create, it's much more an aspect of the everyday flow of our lives. People often get sort of up in arms when I talk about this stuff, because it does seem like it's taking the experience of meaning in life off of its pedestal and embedding it in things that seem trivial or too everyday, too quotidian. And when they do that, I have to whip out my William James quote. And I couldn't be more pleased that William James and I agree that all goods are disguised in the vulgarity of their concomitants in this workaday world. But woe to him who can only recognize them when he thinks them in their pure and abstract form. If we really want to seriously study the good things in life, the things that make life worth living, and meaning in life is that feeling that life is worth living, it has to be embedded in our everyday experiences, in the little things, in, a morning coffee, in sunrises and sunsets, in weekdays, right? If you think of all the ways that we bring structure and we bring routine to this natural world that itself is filled with routine and pattern and lawfulness. The other thing that many psychologists seem to imply is that meaning in life is easily crushed by life experiences, that it's somehow easily threatened and fragile, the sense of meaning. And social psychologists especially seem to imply that this is the case, and it all goes back. People are always citing this old paper by Bruner and Postman from 1949, and you might remember it if you talk about it in your intro classes, right, when you talk about expectancies. And what Bruner and Postman did is they had playing cards in which they changed the color of the card, right, so that spades were red, hearts were black. And people were asked to say as quickly as possible, they were men, they were college students at Princeton, I believe, and they were asked to say as quickly as possible, what is the suit of this card? And Bruner and Postman reported that, this just even switching the color, right, caused people, these men, to be put into an existential crisis, right? And that's a lot of social psychologists kind of believe that when our expectancies are violated, when, anything could come along and just crash our experience of meaning, right? Could destroy our meaning structures. I want to tell you very quickly about 4 studies we did. It's not easy to enhance a person's meaning in life, because often they come into our lab very high in meaning. But it's, I'm about to share, it's even harder to make meaning in life decline. So these are 4 studies. Some of them are online, some of them were in person. And these various studies, what we did is we exposed people to things that should, quote, threaten meaning, such as random rewards instead of systematic rewards. We did it in a smaller scale study, in a larger study. We did a word find where people were exposed to chaos words or boredom, right? They wrote about chaos, they wrote about boredom, right? These studies, we were trying our best to lower meaning in life in the face of these manipulations. In all of these studies, the dependent measure was the experience of global meaning in life. I must say we also did a terror management type of manipulation where we had people write about death right, their own mortality. The results in discussion are nothing happened to meaning in life. None of these things that are commonly discussed as threatening the experience of meaning had any impact on people's self-reported experience of meaning in life. Now, we have to think about this question, right? Is the null possibly true? And none of these studies support the idea that the null should be rejected, but that's different from supporting the null. So we literally were able to calculate the Jeffrey-Zellner-Syall Bayes factors for these results. This tells us how much more likely is the null than the alternative of a difference. And as you can see, the null was between like 5 and 10 or 11 times more likely than the alternative. Meaning in life does not appear to be easily shaken. Now you might be thinking, well, what about an actual life event, right? What about a real life event? So we collected data relevant to the 2016 election. And we're sort of interested in how would the results of an election affect people's experience of meaning in life. In this particular study, we've done this, we did this with, we have data from another sample as well for the same election. For this particular data set I'm going to show you, we collected data in August, and we asked people who they were favoring in the 2016 election. And then we recruited them again immediately after the election. All of the data were collected within 72 hours of the election of Donald Trump. We measured meaning, we measured mood, we measured how much people are engaging in meaning making, we measured how surprised they felt, and so forth. So if you look at these bars, and I'm sorry, I just didn't have time to put the error bars on. It's only been 4 years. But anyway, it does kind of look like maybe Trump supporters were experiencing a little more meaning than, say, Clinton supporters down there at the end. The people in the middle were people who did not vote, who told us in August who they supported, but then they didn't vote. So maybe there's a little tiny chink in the armor of the Clinton voters, but this was actually data from the first wave. This is data in August prior to the election. So there's this small, and this is not uncommon, that conservatives report higher meaning in life than people who are low on conservatism. And in fact, at time 2, we got nothing. The change in meaning in life from time 1 to time 2 was not significant for anybody. And for Clinton voters who you might think would have been quite devastated 72 hours after their favorite candidate was defeated, there was no effect of time, right? That period T was not significant. Now, what's interesting to me is negative affect did spike. Negative affect went way up, positive affect way down, meaning in life stayed the same. Interesting. So both that the mood study that where we induced negative mood, daily diary studies looking at the relationship between negative mood, this is by Tove and Lee, show that meaning in life doesn't seem to be as wound up in negative affect. And now we see in an election, right, that meaning in life is not affected even by something that for many people was extraordinarily upsetting. So misery and unhappiness are not the same as meaninglessness. That we can be unhappy and life can still be meaningful. We can be experiencing distress and life can still be meaningful. So I want to talk a little bit right now, this is newer data about sort of how negative life events might relate differently to the facets of meaning. And we might think about how is it that meaning in life is maintaining? How is it managing to stay high even through very difficult times? And one way to think about that is to think about the facets of meaning, right? Coherence, significance, and purpose. I think it's not uncommon, right, when a person, for example, has experienced a traumatic life event to think that the world has stopped making sense. And Oftentimes when we experience really negative things, we have that feeling of insignificance, that we thought we were special. We thought these things wouldn't happen to us, right? And so they are also can be very damaging to a sense of significance. But purpose might be different. This is a quote from Maya Angelou, right? Someone who had a very, very, very difficult childhood, but then went on to become, one of the greatest poets and singers and actresses and everything of our times, right? And she said, you may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated. In fact, it may be necessary to encounter the defeats so you can know who you are, what you can rise from, and how you can still come out of it. This sense that negative experiences, yes, they may be damaging in some ways, but they may also be strengthening in other ways. And this is a quote from Joe Biden talking to the family of George Floyd. And he said, unlike most, you must grieve in public, and it's a burden that is now your purpose. And if you have followed it all, Joe Biden talking to people who've gone through very negative life experiences, in these conversations, he often brings up purpose. That, yes, this terrible thing happened. Don't let it define you. Let it become your purpose. So we sort of got interested in this idea that maybe purpose matters during negative time, right? Very difficult life experiences. Maybe purpose is one of the ways, a sense of purpose allows us to maintain a sense of meaning even during very difficult times. So one of my students, Hope Rose, has been doing this research on ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and how they relate to the facets of meaning. I'm going to show you the results of one cell in a study that we did. Let me tell you a little bit about the study. So we've done tons of correlational research showing that adverse childhood experiences, right, the experience of neglect, of parental incarceration, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, having your parents divorce, having being in poverty, all kinds of negative childhood experiences are negatively related to meaning in life, and especially through the experience of lowered coherence and lowered significance. And we think about this as sort of tied into the developmental tasks of childhood, right? When you're a child, you have these tasks, right, of developing internal working models of the self as someone who matters in the world, and an internal working model of the world as a reliable, predictable place. And those two tasks seem to be centrally related to significance and coherence. So perhaps not surprising, these adverse childhood experiences predict especially lowered coherence and significance and affect meaning in life through those facets. Purpose is not negatively related to ACEs. It's either unrelated or it can even be positive. We've even shown it to be positively related to a sense of purpose, right, to ACEs, right? So having a difficult childhood does not damage a sense of purpose, and it may even enhance it. So what we did is we did this experiment where we had a large group of participants write about a very positive experience from childhood and a very negative experience from childhood. And they had already completed a measure of adverse childhood experiences. And right after writing, they rated their feelings of purpose, significance, and coherence. They did the the positive and negative in counterbalanced order. Nothing very exciting happened on the happiness, on the positive experience side. But here's what the results looked like for after writing about a negative childhood experience. So these are the average, so these blocks are the facets of meaning, right? Coherence, significance, and purpose. And each of these is shades of adverse childhood experiences, right? So the darker ones mean the person has reported no adverse childhood experiences. And as the shading gets lighter, the person's adverse childhood experiences go up. So right after writing about a negative childhood experience, ACEs are predicting lower levels of coherence, and lower levels of significance. But if you look at purpose, I think it's quite remarkable that people who've had negative childhood experiences, after they're reminded of those difficult times, are actually reporting higher levels of purpose. Now, this could be that thinking about a negative thing is boosting their sense of purpose. I kind of think what's happening here is that they are maintaining it, right? That when we have gone through difficult times, purpose can be something that is still there for us as a way to experience life as meaningful. There seems to be something about purpose that remains even when significance and coherence are lowered. Now, how does all of this fit into a pandemic? And I think it's pretty, superficially, one might say, oh my gosh, this pandemic has hit meaning on all cylinders. The stay-at-home orders, all of the things that we've had to experience, right, have led to a disruption of our routines, right, have really knocked the things that give our lives a sense of coherence. We're prevented from going and seeing people. We're prevented from engaging in rituals with those people, right, which is going to affect coherence and significance. And of course, the pandemic has impacted people's goals, right, and our capacities to do the things that's the goals we value. So you might think this pandemic is a disaster for the experience of meaning. This is we have an ongoing study right now. These are the results from the very first wave. This is a sample of about 2,000 people who rated significance, purpose, and coherence. And the x-axis here is how have you or your family been affected directly by COVID-19? So people who gave it a 1 were not directly affected. People who gave it a 6 were quite directly affected. If you look at the facets of meaning, right, significance seems like maybe it's having a little bit of a curvilinear thing where it's kind of high-ish for low and high-ish at high and sort of down in the middle. Coherence stays at a pretty even keel, but look how high purpose remains. So I went back and I looked at all these different data sets that we've collected, measuring the facets of meaning. And purpose is often high, but significance is as well. Usually, if you look at a sample of people, significance is the highest, but purpose can also be up there too. But here, during a pandemic, purpose is very high, and it stays high. It maintains a high level in people's lives, even when their lives have been directly affected by this terrible time, the surreal time that we're in right now. So in terms of the experience of meaning during a pandemic, I think that for all the disruption that has happened, we can still consider the simple things we have, the things that we still have that can give our lives meaning, right? That can still get in and enhance a sense of meaning. Nature, of course, right? The world, the lawful world in which we live. That right now here in Missouri, we're experiencing a change of seasons, and it is filled with meaning. We have sunrises and sunsets, right? We have squirrels and flowers and changing leaves, right? We have these experiences that we are part of, right? We are also part of nature in this world of things. We are a member of that larger tapestry. Simple pleasure. Positive affect induction in my lab enhances a sense of meaning in life. Suggests to me that engaging in things that are pleasurable, simple pleasures, might be well worthwhile, right? They are worth our time. They are worth our effort during this difficult time. Nostalgia. There was this paper recently in which it was argued that nostalgia is one of the key ways that people are making meaning during this pandemic, right? Looking back. I just read an analysis of trillions of Spotify downloads throughout Europe. And what they found is that during the beginning of these lockdowns, right, at the beginning of the summer, the music that was being downloaded on Spotify was like significantly older than music downloaded in any other beginning of a summer in any other year, right? We are looking back and we are with a wistfulness, right? With that sort of bittersweetness of nostalgia as a way to give our lives meaning. We still have each other. We still have the capacity to love. We have our bonds. Even those of us who live alone, right? We have those people who care about us. We still matter. Social relationships are one of the strongest predictors of meaning in life. We have ourselves. We have our identities. I know that during this time, this very difficult time, for me, one of the worst things is not seeing students, not being able to teach in person, not being able to interact with my lab, my graduate students, right, as a group, not being able to have them over for dinner. But I still am me. I'm still Laura. I'm still their advisor. And in fact, sometimes I feel that one of the things that gives my life meaning is being strong for them and still being that person who listens. We also have novelty. And now, you know, that's one of those things that lots of psychologists think threaten meaning. But if we roll back and remember that meaning is relevant to learning, well, learning only occurs when things are novel. This is an opportunity to learn. It is an opportunity for the curious, right? For our curiosity and our creativity. I think a lot about Viktor Frankl, especially during a pandemic, to think about death, frankly. And in Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl has this part talking about how people living in a concentration camp, how could their lives have meaning? And he observed that for many people, the life would have meaning if they survived. Life would have meaning if they made it out alive. And Frankl rejected that as a way to think about meaning in life. As he said, a life whose meaning depends upon such happenstance ultimately would not be worth living at all. No one will live forever. All good lives, even great lives, end. And that this experience of meaning cannot be attached to only being alive, right? It has to be attached to these times when we are grieving and when, you know, in the midst of sorrow, that all those lives matter. All those lives have meaning. A little more Frankl. You have to excuse me, I study meaning in life. And I think that this is, so oftentimes when I talk about my research, people get really frustrated because I'm trying to convince them that their lives are meaningful, and everyone wants to think that they aren't. And I'm telling you, and I'm the expert, and I have studied meaning in life for 2 decades, and I am telling you, as the world-renowned expert on this topic, your life is meaningful. Your life is filled with meaning. Your job is not to construct meaning. Your job is to recognize it. And I'm often get this guff, right? Well, Viktor, what Viktor Frankl was talking about? Yes, actually it was. This is something that nobody seems to notice that Viktor Frankl said. What is demanded of us is not, as some existential philosophers teach, to endure the meaninglessness of life, but rather to bear our incapacity to grasp its unconditional meaningfulness in rational terms. I believe, like Frankl, that life is unconditionally meaningful. It might feel meaningless sometimes, but it isn't. It might feel meaningless sometimes, but it isn't. It's still unconditionally meaningful. Even during a pandemic, it is unconditionally meaningful. Even when so many of the things that make us feel good, right? Make us feel that our lives have purpose and significance and coherence. When so many of those things may feel like they are gone, we have meaning. I also wanted to mention, as we're coming to the close here, what it means to take care of yourself, what it means to live a meaningful life and to care about that during a pandemic. all in caps. Don't get sucked into the vicious cycle of questioning whether your own sense of personal meaning matters. It does. Sometimes I feel, and I mean, I feel this myself, that we are, oh gosh, why am I worrying about whether my life matters when so many terrible things are happening to so many people? Meaning in life matters, right? During good times and bad. And it's important, right? Think about all the wonderful things it's related to. Taking care of yourself, noticing that your life has meaning, engaging with that meaning that's there for you, right? Isn't about being selfish. It's about survival. So, some closing thoughts. Contrary to how it is often described, meaning in life is commonplace in human life. The sense that life is meaningful is supported by common experience in a world that very often makes sense. When the world stops making sense, a sense of purpose may nevertheless imbue life with meaning. Oh, so that's it for me. Thank you so much. I don't know who's there or if you're there. If folks have any questions, I'm happy to field those. If I can turn this on. You could enter them in the chat if you like. If there aren't any questions, I will wish you all a wonderful weekend and a very meaningful rest of the pandemic.